to our lunchtime leadership session. My name is Chris and I'm the Compass Community Manager here at Datna Group. Today I'm learning, sharing and working on Wurundjeri country, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and of all the countries that you're coming to us from today. I'd love to hear in the chat which country you're on. During this National Reconciliation Week, and I've been reflecting a lot on this year's theme of now more than ever, and that as a non-Indigenous Australian and an ally, that now more than ever I need to stand with Indigenous Australians and stand up against racism and recognise and celebrate their continuing connection to lands, waters and communities. I want to pay my deep respect to Elders past and present and to all First Nations people on the call with us today. To kick us off and to take us through this session, it's my pleasure to hand over to the CEO and founder of Datna Group. She's a leadership activist, the founder of our Compass program and Homeward Bound. Fabian, I'll let you further introduce yourself to people that don't know you.
Thank you, loved Christine, and welcome everybody to this session. We want to make this as interactive as is humanly possible. We're going to ask you all to turn your cameras on rather than be hidden from us. It's not talking at you. We will endeavour to invite you, and we don't care if you're eating in your pajamas, you've got kids or animals in the background, a pot plant, you're working out of your kids' bedroom. None of that matters at all to us. It's seeing your faces and having the chance to interact and take questions that for you are really important in your context. Power is an incredibly interesting topic, and we've had a massive response from our community. We had I think 150 or 160 registrations for this session, which means that a lot of people, even if they're not able to attend, want to listen to the recording, want to listen to our perspective, your perspective on the narrative of power. And I want to start in an incredibly simple space. The first thing is that everyone has power, whether you like it or not. We see other people and pass judgment on how they use power. And you'll notice that a lot of the time, the conversation around power is quite negative. And we attribute it to many aspects, for instance, in organisational life, of being excluded from conversation. It's power over. It is not always about how we influence and get decisions. And the context for power in this session is your power and where it came from, and your level of awareness around not just how you see other people, but how others see you. And a very simple animal metaphor to give you, if you all have a piece of paper in front of you and you just divide it into a grid with 4 squares in the grid, and up the at the bottom right-hand side, you write the word sheep. Bottom left-hand side, you write the word mule. At the top left-hand side, you write the word fox, and at the top right-hand side, you write the word owl, for animals. And it's related to our recognition that we do have power and influence, which is the bottom axis, from low to high recognition of power. But the vertical axis is recognition from, am I working to my goals or others? And I might have got the grid around not having drawn it in front of myself, but very simply, I want to give you an animal. I want you to think as we go through this session, what sort of animal am I? And do I change as an animal depending on the context? So the mule, typically, we would describe as a super stubborn person, appears to resist change. It's the person in an organisation who shuns the information that predicts things coming from more senior leaders, who wants to just do the job, get on with it and be left alone. And they might find other allies who think the same way. So the metaphor of the mule, not fair to the mule, but is the picture of someone who resists what is so obvious to others. The sheep is someone who doesn't understand the change context, but will go along. I don't want to rock the boat. I just want to fit in and do what you ask me to do. So potentially very high commitment to a goal, but very, very low awareness of the political environment or the context within which a goal sits. Very high political intelligence, but all to the self, is the fox. And the fox is the character, if you will, in our families, in our communities, in our work, that gives power its dirty connotation. And the fox is manipulative, is cunning, is very smart, can appear one thing and then do another. You might find with people who have that fox-like predisposition, they have in-groups and out-groups. You're either with me or against me. And when you're with me, I give you all the rewards of being with me. And when you're not part of my conversation. You're very excluded. And finally, the owl. And the owl is a night animal. It's a hunter, but not a wanton hunter. It hunts to feed itself and its chicklets. It is all-seeing and all-knowing as a metaphor. And we say that ultimately, when you are talking power and politics, power and influence, your aspiration is the owl. It's not to turn people into aggressive, nasty, unlikable people, but rather to say power is something to use. So I'm Fabienne Dattner. Some of you, I think most of you would know me well in one context or another. If not, 3 descriptors I have for you. The first is I'm a leadership specialist, but I'm a leadership activist more than that. So I'm interested in what about the practice of leadership needs to change in order for us to create a sustainable future. Second is I care deeply about people, but I care more about how we live in balance on this planet. And as the famous Carl Sagan said, there is no evidence that someone's coming from out there to rescue us from ourselves. So I believe that as the theoretically most evolved creature on the planet, human beings have an immense duty of care to each other, but an even greater duty of care to sustain, maintain, and care for this very small spaceship we all inhabit going through this infinitely large universe. And finally, and I ask your forgiveness in advance for this, I'm a weeny bit of a pirate. And what that actually means is sometimes I say things that have people going, what, did she just say that? And there's a little bit of a shock effect. Think of me kindly when I do that. I think I don't have the boundaries that many people have that warn me I'm about to say something that is potentially inappropriate. But if you understand the first 2 things about me, then you will hopefully forgive me the third one if it pops out. On the other hand, if you want to have a party, it's off record, I'm your girl. So welcome to this session, and you are welcome to comment in the chat, to ask questions in the chat. And we've got people online who will help manage conversation online, so we bring it into the public domain. So I think the first thing I would say that we are all very aware, I think, today about the importance of culture, understanding how we learn to behave in order to get on wherever we work, live, or play. We understand that there is a very different culture in Australia compared to India. There's a different culture in India compared to Mexico. And we go wide-eyed and curious if we travel for the first time to different countries at all the things that are different about different cultures. When you scratch below the surface of culture, there are a range of levers you can pull to affect change, to influence, to guide the evolution of culture. And one of the biggest is your understanding and your use of power. Now, for many people, power feels unsafe and risky. We don't feel we can talk up. We don't feel we can share as comfortably as we would like to. There is power over us from people above us. And we don't feel able to disagree or exchange comfortably. And consequently, we don't thrive or contribute any near as much as we could do so. But power is actually a currency. And when it's used effectively, when it's understood, when we exercise power constructively, then we produce better outcomes and we engage other people more effectively. When human beings aren't afraid, then we will contextually use resources more effectively. We understand that there are many different sources of power and many different ways of expressing power. But the first thing we have to recognize is that power is a thing. We all have it, and we often don't think about it. So in coming into this conversation, if you want to increase engagement in a family, in a community, in a team, or in a business, then the conversation around power is incredibly important. When children are very little, there is a huge power differential between the parent and the child. And up to and about the age of 2 to 3, the child accepts that willingly. And then many of you will know the famous apparent terrible 2s and 3s start to emerge, where little people exercise power against a parent. And this is actually a development in the way the brain functions. And a 2 to 3-year-old is thinking in bipolar scales. I can, I can't. I will, I won't. I do, I don't. And so fights emerge about times to go to bed, food to eat, having a bath or a shower, because the parent, coming from a reasoning perspective and holding all the power, tries to explain to a child who's not thinking that way why my choice for you to go to bed this time is the right choice. The child wants to exercise power, but it only does it through this choice or this choice. If parents give kids that bipolar choice, suddenly a lot of the challenges that emerge in little people start to evaporate. As you get older, however, and in the context of this session, talking about what happens in working environments, if you have a significant lack of engagement where you work or in a team or in a collective, the quality of output drops. So where engagement drops, the quality of work drops. There's a loss of productivity because we don't work together. So when engagement drops, productivity drops, and it drops because we are not working together or sharing information. Typically, there's more absenteeism. People get sick more often. Where there are issues around psychological safety, and of course, it's become the buzzword. And I was just before this session, which we might share with you after the session in the email that will go out to you all, I was looking at the Netflix superstructure behind their culture. And safety is created because you respect people and include them. Safety is created not because we have a policy on safety, but because we have a culture that says we have power with people, not power over people. We include people in decision-making and we respect final decision-making. We know team functioning is significantly better when people feel they can collaborate and share resources. And for most of us in this day and age, that's not what we feel. And finally, the culture is built to enhance, promote, and secure a place in which power is seen as an asset of what we do and not a liability. Now, what we want to do with you is give you, and I think I'm right for time, I buried my agenda. We want to give you 10 minutes together in breakouts of 3. And we want you simply to talk about how do you see your own sources of power. And we want you to share, if you can, three ways of filtering your perception around the narrative of power. The first one is your personal attributes that influence your sense of power. So I might say I come from a family of wordsmiths. Storytelling and language are part of my sense of my ability to influence. I have a belief that has evolved from my early years that I can explain most things, that I can help people come together when there's conflict. I believe that I am never afraid of saying sorry because I think I can explain to people where I'm coming from, help them explain where they're coming from, and get another outcome better than either of us originally had. And I would describe that as a personal strength. I have high verbal acuity. I think part of my personal power is I'm tall and I have a presence physically. For a lot of my early years, I shied away from that, but the reality is it is a source of power for me personally. I think being loving and having a fairly wicked sense of humour are also sources of power for me. I have a very strong sense of historical context. I was brought up in an artistic, creative family, and that family encouraged difference and diversity. It was a family of artistic, entrepreneurial rule breakers. So not surprising that I evolved to be something of a loving pirate. And I would describe that as a source of historical power. I'm also very mindful that I am the CEO of the Datner Group. I am the founder and until recently stepped down CEO of Homeward Bound, and power comes with starting something that people know about and also by virtue of my title. Positional power has an effect. Sometimes it's not the effect I would wish. And I'm just really beginning to wrap my head around power is not what I just think, it's what other people think of me. So we want you to have a little bit of time in groups of 3, simply answering those 3 questions. Do I have a sense of the power source from myself growing up? What are the expectations of power in the working environment? And what are your own bases of power? And there's music coming and going suddenly. Thanks, Sarah. So you'll have 10 minutes in groups of 3, mixed. Just enjoy the conversation. You don't have to get through all of it, but try and let everyone in the group describe some aspect of how they see or describe power. And sometimes, by the way, there's powerful and there's powerless. Just to make sure that you feel comfortable having that conversation. I think when I was very young, I had quite a scarring experience about what I look like. And for a huge part of my life, I would have expressed a degree of powerlessness about my physical appearance. I always thought I was the biggest person. I didn't think I was particularly attractive. And it intimidated me in the company of other people. A lot of work, and many decades later, I think I have a more comfortable understanding of and acceptance of my physical presence. So I want each of you to express how you see being powerful or powerless, and in the context of family, your work, and history. Enjoy the conversation.
All right.
I must say, as I look out on this impressive sea of faces, there's a lot of people here who I love and know well. Deb, lovely to see you here. You could be running this session in your own right. So lovely to see you, Annette Gray. Many people online who I know the topic in different contexts and have a lot to contribute. I just want to get a quick sense from anyone who wants to volunteer it, or in the chat might be the easiest way to do it. Which aspect of power was it easiest for you to identify? Your personal attributes, power in the social setting, or power in terms of the historical context? You can put it as personal, social, or historical in the chat, just so we get a sense of which of those was easiest for you, of the three. Yes, personal. Great. Super interesting. It's running 70-30 personal, historical, familial. And the historical family component being part of an important conversation between you all. That's very, very interesting. And Jane making the note historical only because I spent some time unpacking that. Okay, that is super interesting to see it so heavily weighted to the personal. Probably talks to how much effort goes into understanding ourselves in this day and age. So I want to show you something and tell you a little bit about those three contexts. And I'm going to ask Christine to put up a slide that's going to tell you about the traps of how we use power, and possibly a lucky pick on my part to pick this lens to look at power. To alert you really to there are three traps of power. And the traps of power tell us when we're doing it or we see others doing it, that there is a need to put some effort into developing your focus on and use of power. Also, an important skill at developing your role of power, recognizing you have a role, whether you like it or not, and it is a lens through which power is discussed or seen or observed or assessed, and then developing a sense of power. So there are three ways power gets abused, no matter where you sit in a family, in a team, in a community, or an organizational, in an organization. The first is, and appropriately, the picture of a cat is the unconscious use of power. It's when you are not even aware that you have power simply by being or walking into a room. And you know that there are some people who, when they walk into a room, have presence, have some attribute that people turn and know the person's entered. There's a lot of unconscious use of power in families by a member of a family over other members of the family. Coming home from work and a parent saying, I'm tired, I don't want to talk, throwing their keys by the front door, dropping their bags, and then getting frustrated and irritated with people in the family because they're tired. They're not aware that they're having an impact on the mood, feeling, and engagement in a family context. There's self-serving power. There's power I use to get my outcomes. This is the domain of the fox. This is the manipulative side of power that makes us anxious. But there are people who use power to get an outcome, but their outcome is potentially a generous one. So you get the difference between personal power and socialized power. I use power for myself, or I use my power to get an outcome for many. And finally, there is reactive use of power. When you are triggered by something, you get angry, frustrated, irritated. And of course, the line of anger, how and why we get angry, is common to all of us. The story we attach to anger is different, but the process of anger is the same. Irritation, frustration, anger, fury is because someone or something is coming between you and something that you really want. And so we start reacting unwittingly. That can turn into very aggressive oppositional behavior, and people are frightened or intimidated by us. We're unaware that becoming an attack dog, we're causing other human beings to be the dogs that roll over and present their bellies to us. I'm not a threat. I'm okay. You can eat me. And we're unaware that in frightening people into compliance, we're not getting the right decision. We're getting a frightened response to a reactive use of power. So one is the use of power unconsciously. Two is the use of power for self-serving reasons. And the third is a reactive approach to power. Now, remember, those are considered the traps of power. So what are you going to do about that? Next slide, please, Chris. There are absolute keys to the use of power, and there are developmental levers. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this at the end. I can't go through this in detail in this program, but I'd say 3 things for you to focus on. You have to develop your use of power, and you have to be very conscious of the traps. So if I want to increase my influence, how aware of myself am I? Do I know why this is important to do? And knowing why it's important and having a high level of self-awareness, I help others rise up as well. And taking that focus with a clear outcome, high level of self-awareness, and bringing others with me, I avoid the traps of power. I avoid unconsciously affecting other people, acting as if this is for my own outcomes only, and actually frightening people. So you develop your sense of power, or particularly your use of power. The second thing you have to do, and this has really changed my approach to power, and some of you may know we are diagnostic specialists. We carry over 60 different diagnostics. We do extensive work with executives, senior leaders all over the world now. And a lot of our work is trying to find the right instrument for the right individual or team to get the right outcome. And for a long time, we've been searching the world for a very good tool to measure power as it plays out between us. And we've now finally found one called the Diamond Power Index, which some people online today will be familiar with, and indeed some of you, even under our invitation, have become recently accredited in the use of the diagnostic. And one of its most important contributions is to invite you to develop your understanding of the role of power through a lens that says whether I think I'm being judicious or not. If being judicious is an important attribute of how I use power, how do other people see me using that? If being fair is an attribute of the use of or role of power, am I fair, or have I got a bias at work in my role? And a silly example might be I'm under a lot of pressure. We have a lot of work to do. We have a very short time frame, and I tend to go to the same 1 or 2 people to talk through problems or challenges. The effect of that is to communicate a significant bias to other people that I choose friends, family, or like-minded people to elevate or make more visible. And I am unaware that, given my role, that has an impact. Fabi, spend a lot of times working overseas now. And when I come back to the office, some newer members of our team might feel shy about asking to spend time with me. When I hear that, I'm horrified, because I love people and have spent a lot of time working to include people. But in my role, if I don't realize as CEO, and as someone now working in an environment most people in our business have not experienced, that they will look at my busyness, think I'm inaccessible and now describe me as being remote and inaccessible. And what they're actually saying is, I don't feel that I have the right to ask you for time. So developing role of power is understanding how your role is seen by other people. Your sense of power is about understanding where it comes from and how it is evolved for you, and doing that with a growth mindset. A quite significant proportion of people come to the conversation of power from a highly defended space. And that is that they say they have a growth mindset, but they actually have quite a protective mindset. And even though they score well, for instance, in this particular diagnostic, when you look at the growth mindset and the extent to which they feel safe and open, you recognize that they don't feel safe and open, and they are quite reserved in how they express or make themselves available to feedback. We would say that the clever leader, the leader who has a strong sense of power, is able to distinguish between people it's important to get feedback from, and it's people, when you get their feedback, listen, care to hear it, but don't be overwhelmed or pushed off your perch by it. So knowing who and where to hear feedback. So very quickly, I want to say to you, there are 3 sources of reflection, and we are going to give you a diagnostic on this that you can download and take away. And we're going to give it we're calling it Finding Your Power Imprint, and it's in a questionnaire. If you want to, you can open it up now as I talk to it. Just go to that link and it'll bring up the diagnostic. And the first thing it will explain to you is what social power really is. And it derives from social markers in your workplace. It's often actually invisible, but it's very visible to other people with lower social status to you. So often executive or senior leadership teams talk to themselves and come to believe certain things are true about the people and the organisation, culture and performance, but they're in a self-fulfilling conversation with people like them. When they get true feedback from people lower down the organisation, suddenly they learn things about perception that are quite surprising and not what we would expect. So you get a lot around social power that belongs to a role and translates into a social context. I might get you to put that slide up, Christine, if you wouldn't mind, the social power slide. So, you're welcome to read it, but it's all there in the giveaway we're giving you today. Personal power is much more about inner abilities or traits or predispositions. Sometimes they're innate. Like, I think I probably had high verbal acuity from a very early age, but it was also focused on in our family. So it's a family that read prodigiously. Books were just part of our lives from as early as I can remember. So language and developing language was habituated in my family. It's portable, by the way. Personal power walks around with you. It's not stuck in a job or a role or a position. And having a strong sense of mission or purpose, and we use Malala's image for that, is going to move whether you are rich or poor, famous or not famous. That will push you to do and be and create irrespective. And finally, there's, the narrative of historical power, and a very cute image of the little dog thinking it has all the power. Well, maybe it does. Little dogs are scary things. It actually refers to where rank is internalized. If you come from families where a parent, dad, for instance, he held the power, he made the decisions, we knew where we stood. Mum, you could negotiate with, you could challenge, you could have a laugh with, you could push the boundaries with, not so much dad. And the ability to challenge is seen as a skill, but in families it can also be a liability, a risk. So one child challenges and is seen to be strong, resilient, and competitive, and one child complies, often described as the good kid. So I don't think we've got time to explore the personal power, which is we thought that might happen. So we've actually given you the actual diagnostic to play with. Now, I did that exercise that we're giving you probably about 18 months ago. And when you do all components and you answer all the questions, you'll start to see a particular pattern emerging, and it will repeat until you reach the point where you say to yourself, isn't it interesting to notice across the categories that there are some core strengths, but there are also some core opportunities. So if I use myself as an example to you, when I did this, core strengths about really caring for and loving people, high verbal acuity, with my physicality, very high energy, and I'm very clear about why I do what I do, and on my values, what's important. However, I have to be very careful that I'm not physically imposing. I have to be very mindful around verbal acuity. Speak slower, speak clearer, recognize that many people, English is not their first language. And as I said at the very beginning of this session, learn about the boundaries that other people need, want, and deserve that increase safety. You can start to write your own power story, which I've done, and enjoy how the patterns between the historical context, the social context, and your personal power come together to tell the story of who you are as a human being. Now, that's a little taste, a very little taste, of a 3-day residential we have coming up in September, and Christine will give you the details of this. And the reason why we do Power with You is we are living in a deeply divided time, and we believe we are actually at a critical crossroads. To the right is a sort of anarchical world, a world where we pull away from each other, and the improbable probability of Trump, for instance, getting back in as president of America leads to a pathway that is quite intimidating. And I'm not sure that I'm happy that I actually watched this film, but 2 nights ago I watched The Civil War, the film that's come out just recently about the Civil War in America, yet to come. And you see how quickly the structures we create to be constructive together are hard to build and they're easy to undermine. So we are doing everything in our power to increase your power, to increase your influence, to increase your sense of agency, because we believe more of the right people, and that includes, as is evident in a large majority of our audience, boundless numbers of women leading and influencing the way we are operating together and doing what we can to counterbalance a world where power is being abused, and it's self-serving, it's intimidating, and it's deeply unaware. And everyone on the planet, let's say within reason, who's alive today will be dead 110 years from now. But the way we behave, the legacies that we leave, will have an imprint for thousands of years. So the program in the Hunter Valley in October, sorry, not September, has 3 days on elevating the capacity to use power effectively. We also, just because we would wish you to know this, have a Compass flagship program coming up, and that's in September. We've actually, I think this is our first face-to-face program in 4 years, which we're excited to do. All the other programs up to September are full. In February, in April, and in June 2025. And we've had now probably close to 2,200, 2,300 women from around Australia, Southeast Asia, and the US participate, Mexico and Peru. And interestingly enough, as a result of women participating from North America, Mexico, and Peru, we now have a very big women's initiative happening in Mexico and Peru to elevate their visibility leading, which is, and doing it as a collective, by the way. So I might hand over at this stage to Christine to fill in the gaps that I've missed.
Thank you very much, Fabe. I think that's basically all the information that we need. That Compass flagship is coming up. We're very excited about face-to-face in Melbourne, but also that we'll be running a face-to-face program in Sydney in April next year. So keep an eye on that one as well. And after this session, please feel free to stay on the call. I'll stay on for a couple of minutes to answer any questions you have about Compass flagship or Compass Advance, and we can send you more information as well. And I guess we can ask for any questions in this last part, baby.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to suggest. We've got a few minutes up our sleeve, and we'll stop sharing the slides and maybe go to our audience. And anyone got a burning question you would really love to ask at this stage, or an observation to make yourself?
How do you define the difference? So I was talking in our room about wanting to be relatively egalitarian and approachable open door policy as an employer, and yet sometimes people taking advantage of that as weakness and doing things that they shouldn't do. So defining the line of, you know, wanting to have an open door, but in the end, you're still the boss, the decision maker, and the person who, you know, often people think bosses are, oh, you're all millionaires and you're all doing this out of greed and whatever, and don't take into consideration until you become a boss and understand what the costs and things are.
Bernadette, that's a fantastic question, and I could keep you here for a week on processing with all of you the answer to that question. The first thing I will give back to you is sometimes when we are very approachable, what's driving our behaviour is we want people to like us. We want people not to see us as the boss, and we want them to feel I'm one of you. Come and ask me any questions when you want. And, you know, we want an egalitarian. I don't want to be the boss, actually, is what it feels like. And then the way people take advantage, you know, he said, she said, we say. And so what was said in one context gets distorted, or you're constantly being interrupted, or you're constantly having petty things brought to you. So when you do make a decision, hold on a minute, didn't you say this is meant to be egalitarian? And so we would say that is worthy of a deep dive. Why is that happening? And the why has to be at two levels. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What is motivating my behavior? And when I talk about being the boss, you have to make some decisions. That's true. But do I sit at the top of, or do I sit in the center of a circle? Am I in collaborative dialogue to clear purpose, strategy, and values? Or am I just doing problem solution, problem solution, problem solution? But the problem is I'm solving the wrong problem. And so the only reason why people come to me is, oh, Marie said, and before you know it, you're trapped in a conversation with Susan about Marie, and Marie's not in the room. And what a lot of leaders do that I think gets them trapped is they try to provide a solution. And so that the open door becomes an open door for complaints, not an open door for collaboration. Does any of that ring true, Bernadette?
Yes, I think past experiences where the bosses seemed to be aloof and away from things. So I felt that, I would put myself on cleaning the tea table and doing all the jobs that other people would do, yet taking, obviously greater financial risks and greater responsibilities, where people would, even when you would explain, this is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, not necessarily to be liked, but to feel like, okay, I'm in the trenches with you, but so I feel like through that you can see that I respect that you've got hard work because I'm doing it too, but I have other responsibilities as well. And yet sometimes people would undermine that.
Great comment from John in the chat. John, would you like to say what you just said on the chat?
Oh, I can see it, yeah.
John could write it, but he can't work out where his mute button is.
Exactly right. Thank you for that prompt. I was just sort of commenting to, in response to that last question, that workplaces, work people, and mums and dads outside, they recognise authenticity when they see it. They also recognise when people are not authentic, and in that sense, for example, I've always realised that the full strategic capability of an organisation is not going to be met unless you embrace all of the skills and competencies and perspectives of your people. And the only way to do that is to talk to them, to encourage them to provide answers. And if they meet roadblocks in that process, you've got to unblock that that process.
Perfect.
So I just think that people recognise authenticity, and people, managers in particular, have got to realise the difference between leadership and management. And
perfect. And you make the point too in the written comment about open and closed conversations.
Yep.
Bernadette, that was a great question, and John, a really relevant response. Anyone else want to raise a question or an observation? Go for it. You could just make a statement. You can just, what do I think? What do I think about the session? Was this useful? What caught my attention?
Phoebe, oh,
you go, Sarah. We actually have a comment in the chat that said, I think you said 2 levels or things. One was what is motivating my behaviour. What was the second thing? And that was in response to Bernadette's question earlier.
What is motivating my behaviour? And by default, what is motivating other people's behaviour? And what is the context that people are coming to me on? That doesn't sound as utterly brilliant as the first thing I said, but that's roughly what I meant.
I would be happy to offer an observation.
Yes, go, Bron.
I think what is refreshing about this discussion is positioning power in a positive way. I think power can be demonized, often used to weaponize discussions, but actually coming from a authentic power and a power for good is quite powerful in itself, and recognizing how you can utilize different forms of power. And I haven't been in similar sessions like that, which I really appreciated, Fabian, you pointing out the physical power. And Jodie and I had a great discussion where Jodie was saying that one of her powers is she's quite short in stature, but that means she can take people by surprise. And utilize that. So I really appreciated that perspective on power and how it can be used for good. And, obviously, and just to use a cheesy line, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
From our Spider-Man friends.
Yeah, very purposeful. Thank you, Bron. That's wonderful. Anyone else? Just a comment from him. We'll get 2 more. What you thought, what you heard, what mattered.
Maybe if I can.
Yes, go, Nina.
Maybe I can
Nina.
jump in.
Good to see you again.
Hi. Sorry, my internet is pretty bad. It's I'm in the hospital at the moment, but it's yeah. Anyway, I just
Are you in a
thank you for the
hospital
session.
bed,
It was really
Nina?
good. It's
Nina, are you in a hospital bed?
yes.
That's power.
Yes, I
Yeah, she's coming from a hospital bed session.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. It's I just had one of those epiphanies in the last hour since we talked about all of this, where my behavior is actually coming from, and so I understand how, well, not only how my power sense is and how I use power, which is unfortunately not the great way, but it's I now understand where it's coming from. So it's I feel like I can attack it and well, hopefully join to learn a little more about that in October.
Great, thank you. And yes, get well from all of us to you for whatever reason that you're in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Motorcycle accident, it's fine.
Oh no. Have you broken something?
But it's okay, let someone else
All right. Well, big hugs, big love to
find
you.
power.
I was just going to say what's running through my mind at the moment is the difference between how I perceive myself and the space that I occupy and who I am versus my position, which is by its nature carries a lot of power that I don't necessarily associate with myself. So it's that stop and prop to, you know, where's the balance there? Because I always want to be me, and sometimes people are reacting to the position, the power of the position. So yeah, it was very interesting to reflect on it.
That's so very important. That's a pivotal part of what we will do in October, by the way, Michelle, and I think you know this well. The reality is when you have a position and you say, but I'm not that person, I just want to be one of the group. The answer is, but you're not.
Yeah.
You're not, you're actually not.
Yeah.
And I find that really personally, it's been quite hard for me to face into that because I have no sense of hierarchy, and I'm rebellious if I get put into a hierarchical space, and I have to be very conscious not to be. And I remember when I did the accreditation talking to Julie Diamond, who developed the diagnostic, and she's saying, Fabe, tough titties. You know, you are the CEO, whether you like it or not. There is a perception associated with the role. Now, do you want that perception to be everything that it needs to be to enable other people? Are you going to sit with a position and a behavior that has an impact that undermines? You want people to feel safe and able to speak up, then have a think about with that position how you help them speak up. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting journey, you know, that will continue for some time. Anyone, we're happy to stay on for another 10 minutes for those of you who'd like to stay on. Bye, Deb. Lovely to see your face. We're happy to stay on for those of you who'd like to stay on and have a chat about this. Is there any other questions that you might like to raise?
I'm happy to raise something again. I had a discussion in our group. My mother and father were Irish who moved to England and then moved to Australia. And when my father was in England, it was Irish and dogs need not apply for accommodation, and Irish jokes and all of the other things that come about for sort of belittling the nation. My father had a bit of a chip on his shoulder because of that, and so really pushed us that we had to be bigger and better, and you know, we all went on to tertiary education. So they were smart, but they had very little education. And when I had discussions with my family about Indigenous communities and how they're put down, and it sort of hit me when I was teaching about it, how you know, we were in a position of being put down and how that felt for us. And one of my brothers said, well, look at the fact that, look what our dad did. And yet these Indigenous people, they don't do anything. They don't pull themselves up by the bootstraps and get on with it. And I said, yes. But although my father was on the totem pole, sort of low down by compared to the proddy white Englishman, he was still tall, handsome, white, English speaking. And so all of these things command power of some sort. So although his race and nationality perhaps, and the fact that he was Catholic sort of put you somewhere down along the way. There are attributes of power, as you've discussed, that actually mean a lot in your ability to be able to do something about your opportunities.
Sure, for sure. And that then also brings in the narrative of the historical conditioning around power, powerful, powerless. It's interesting to use the Irish as an example because they've weaponized humor. You know, they're some of the funniest people on the planet out of necessity.
Yes, but they weren't the ones who did the Irish jokes. My father's favourite was, why do Australians wear thongs? Because they can't work out how to do up shoelaces, which was his one and only joke back against all the terrible Irish jokes that he hated.
All right. Any other comments or questions or observations? Quite a few of you are staying on.
Wonderful.
Any questions you want to ask about June? October of Christine while she's here.
Nina, you have a question?
Oh, Nina, you do know we love you. And I think you might have to tell us what happened. There's enough of us here who know you.
It happened last year in July already. There was a motorcycle accident. A car chucked the view in front of me without looking into the mirror, and I broke my pelvis, but they missed that the whole joint came out once, so I also had a labral tear. So now I got surgery for that. But my actual question was, which is way more interesting, is how many people will there be? It's like, how big is the group that you're aiming for October?
I think it's a maximum of around 20, but it's in a very, very beautiful open space. Maybe 25. I'm not. How many is it, Christine?
I think it was, probably 20 is the group that we're looking for.
It's an amazing experience, a very beautiful location, fabulous food, fabulous wine.
I was just going to say, I've heard a lot about the food and the beautiful walks that you can go on and the nature that you're surrounded by, in addition to amazing content.
And the actual property we do it on is the woman who owns it and developed it is herself a Compass Advance graduate, and she'll tell the story of how
really?
Yeah. And she'll tell the story of how it came about and what she's done. She was operations manager in Wrigley and just miserable. It's not what she wanted.
Nina, it's a lot warmer than the advance you attended down on the surf coast.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but even that one was amazing. So well, I trust baby now when she chooses something. So.
Any other questions you want to raise? Yeah, go on.
I've got one. It's not really, it's not directly related to your subject today, but a little time ago, No Names, No Pact Drill, you did an exercise with a council in New South Wales, and you allegedly the performance of that place has turned around. Is there a case study written on what the inputs and outcomes are?
Yeah, phenomenal case. We've got quite a few council case studies, but I think the one you might be referring to is Armidale Regional Council. We've got a great case study. It's on the website, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, it is on the website, John. I can flick you the link to it if you like.
All right. Well, if you could do that, that'd be good. And hopefully, I come from Victoria, and you could do a lot more work down here.
Yeah, we're working on that. We're working on that.
Okay.
Thank you, John. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, other than looking at it, yes, Tracy, go for it. Are you saying goodbye? All right. Big hugs to you all. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.